But for the victims' loved ones, this news could provide comfort. Identifying victims' remains has been a slow process because bodies can only be recovered when the surrounding area is declared safe from explosives. Part of expediting that process involves getting DNA samples from family members who lost loved ones, according to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Now, once remains are available, authorities are using rapid DNA technology to quickly develop a DNA profile from family members to compare to those remains, according to the TBI. The explosion at the plant was so large, Sarah, that it also registered a 1.6 magnitude earthquake. Investigators say the cause of the blast may not be known for weeks or even months, in part because the impact area is so widespread. Some residents have even found debris as far as 2 miles from the facility, according to the Hickman County Sheriff's Office. But again, when thinking of the victims' families, as the sheriff said, quote, "This is that one little piece of light that's made it through in efforts to give families the hope of having closure."
Technology.
Yeah, it's really awful just looking at just how devastating that was. At least the families know for sure that their loved ones did not make it, and they can start to mourn them. Ivan Rodriguez, thank you so much for that story. Appreciate it. John?
All right, more than 100 students in quarantine after a measles outbreak sweeps across several schools. In a mass rescue operation, hundreds of people airlifted out of their villages after an historic storm.
I want to be able to see what that storm was like, because I heard that last night on Coast to Coast, talking about how devastating that it was. I think, according to what it said last night, they said it displaced about 1,500 people, and that some people, it actually washed their houses off into the ocean while they was in them. I don't know how many's dead, but it was like a tsunami or something that hit all of a sudden. Unbelievable. But getting back to the Tennessee explosion, I went out there within the first 24 hours of whenever the explosion actually took place, and I did get an interview from the sheriff there, pertaining to what was happening. And I just find it to be remarkable, first of all, that the Richter scale only registered, what they say, a 1.6 or something like that. I felt like that it would be at least a 2 in comparison to the earthquake Richter scale that happened during the Oklahoma bombing, that actually registered 2 different registers that day, simultaneously back to back. But I also find it remarkable that we have the technology now that we can basically, within, like he said, 2 hours, determine whether or not this is to verify closure in whether or not this really was the victim or not. It's remarkable how technology has come around. I do want to make another comment, which is kind of related, semi, in response towards what the TBI done regarding digging up the remains of Buford Pulser's wife to make a determination of whether or not they felt like that she could have actually been killed by Buford Pulser himself during the events of all the commotion going on. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'd recently talked to one of the people that worked there at the museum in Adamsville, the Buford Pulser Museum, to be able to discuss with her, because of me having a certain particular product that come from that particular era in the Buford Pulser Chief Administration Department, that I told her, I said, I don't see where pertaining to justice, that what they done, because it costed the taxpayers money to be able to dig her remains up and make this analogy towards determining whether or not it was Buford's gun that killed her, or whether or not it was somebody else's, because I'm sure they thoroughly investigated that to the best of that they could have in the early 70s whenever all that took place. But I don't see in the name of justice where that could have helped or degraded one way or the other pertaining to the event of Buford Pulsar, because in actuality what that done was bring questions in response towards the museum down there, and plus they have a festival every spring in Adamsville pertaining to the Buford Pulsar walking tall deal every year that they was in question about keeping open or not. Here we go again towards the news. Please listen.
The outbreak began back in July. 5 additional cases were confirmed just on Tuesday. On top of that, right now, more than 130 unvaccinated school children there are now being forced to quarantine because of exposure to the disease. It's gone across multiple schools. And state health officials are sounding the alarm, urging people to get vaccinated.
We are certainly concerned about the declining vaccination coverage that would bring what we consider herd immunity to this population. When that vaccination coverage level starts to drop to about the 90% level, which is well below 95%, the level that is most effective in providing herd immunity, it does cause us great concern. The fact that this is a large number of students, among the highest enrollment in the state, that has lower vaccination coverage, is an additional threat to the population in general.
Joining me right now for some more perspective is CNN medical analyst Dr. Jonathan Reiner. I mean, you and I have had this discussion now going on months as you look at a different part of the country and a measles outbreak spreading. I mean, the numbers are really troubling. 139 unvaccinated students exposed and quarantining. You've got more confirmed cases now being reported. What do you take from this latest update coming from South Carolina and how this outbreak is spreading?
Well, it's representative of what's happening across the country. Vaccination rates in the United States over the last decade have dropped substantially. And for the measles virus, which is a very efficient pathogen, you need 95% of the community, 95% of the kids to be vaccinated to provide, what we call herd immunity.
Wow.
In 2019, the nationwide vaccination rate for measles was over 95%. And last year it was 92.7%. Now that doesn't seem like a giant drop, but it's below that threshold for herd immunity. And in South Carolina, it's 90%.
Good grief.
So when you have so many kids who are unvaccinated, it's basically like having a lot of dry tinder around a forest fire.
Right.
And what vaccines do, and continuing the forest fire metaphor, is it clears out the brush. It prevents the virus from continuing to spread in the community. But when you have a lot of kids who are unvaccinated, you have a lot of opportunity for viral spread. And we've seen outbreaks now in 42 states in the United States. This is the highest number of cases of measles since 1992. And it's going to continue because the trend in this country is less vaccination, not more.
And I just off the top of my head, I definitely did not come up with 42 states. I was just thinking of the ones you and I have talked about recently. You've got South Carolina is part of this larger trend. You got Minnesota's reporting new cases this week. And then you had that large outbreak in West Texas earlier that I know that we talked so much about. And what I see in this is it appears it is local health departments taking this very seriously, urging people to get vaccinated, urging people to protect themselves, talking about how serious the disease is, how easily it can spread, how easily, though, it can be avoided. What do you see as the role of local health departments now in the era of Robert Kennedy's Health and Human Services compared to in the past?
They have to take the lead. I mentioned that 30 years ago, there was a rather large outbreak of measles in the United States. In 1990, there were 27,000 cases of measles. And what the federal government did at that time was to enact the Vaccines for Children program, which basically provided free vaccines to underinsured or uninsured families and families on Medicaid. And then through the decade of the 90s, vaccine rates soared so much that by 2000, There were only 85 cases of measles in the United States, and measles was declared eradicated. But in the last decade, we've seen exactly the opposite. We've seen the spread of misinformation about the safety of this particular vaccine, the MMR vaccine, a lot of that coming from a group founded by the current health secretary, RFK Jr. And the net result of that has been a dramatic decline in vaccination rates. In the West Texas outbreak, the federal government was anemic in their response and did not vigorously advocate for vaccination. Instead, promoted unproven treatments like vitamin A. So the states have to take the lead. In New York in the 1990s, which was really the epicenter of the giant outbreak, there were buses converted into mobile clinics that went around through inner city communities where as many as 50% of kids were unvaccinated, vaccinating kids. So I think we're starting to see that some mobile vaccination centers in South Carolina tackle this. So state health departments must take up the slack here because it's not coming from Washington.
Yeah, it does seem that's where the focus definitely needs to be right now. Dr. Jonathan Reiner, it's good to see you. Thank you so much. Sarah.
All right. At our CNN town hall, voters going toe-to-toe with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. Hear what they have to say. And it's almost Election Day in America.
Yes, it is.
The running. I knew she was going to do something. You knew that was coming. That's the tease. That's it. We're done.
Anyways, whenever we go to debate in science, we're actually questioning our own ability to be able to recognize these dangers. And the fact of the matter is, it is AI. And whenever I say AI, I'm talking about social media in general that has basically dampened the authenticity of science to the degree that now we begin to question even our own abilities to be able to determine whether or not what we're talking about is authentic or not. Whenever this occurs, now you're putting question marks on the fact of, well, did they really know what they said that they knew? As I was getting with a while ago in not questioning science pertaining to what went on with Buford Pulsar, and the only reason why that I'm emphasizing upon this, it's not because of the DNA technology that they was talking about that happened during the Middle Tennessee explosion, but the fact that my uncle and Buford Pulsar had somewhat of a relationship during that time that they actually debated on whether or not they was going to go into business with one another towards selling suits, soft lines, retail, stuff like that right there. But the fact that of what that they have done recently, the feds here in the state of Tennessee, it has brought a great deal of question in regards towards the true walk-in tall Buford Pulsar stories that we've all been told about. There's no doubt whenever Buford Pulsar was going through the things that he was going through because of the townsmen that basically went against him over in the Savannah, Adamsville area, there's no doubt that during that chaotic moment or moments, especially with as much stuff as Buford went through, it's a possibility that his wife could have reached a climax point that she actually turned against Buford Pulsar during a very stressful, high-intensity, drama, shocking event. And there's no doubt, out of an act of passion, he might have possibly killed his own wife. But once more, what did or was that going to do in the eyes of justice in verifying one way or the other, whether or not he did or he didn't, especially after this many years has went by. That's kind of like what went on during the 51-day standoff, during the time that several people have been injured, not only physically injured, but emotionally injured, and the ordeal that was going on with the Branch Davidians. There's no doubt that during that 51 days, there ain't no telling what people was talking about. There ain't no telling what people was thinking during that time. There ain't no telling what people was doing during that time. And there's no doubt that whenever the actual blaze did start, the quickest way of ending the point of suffering in the exposure of all that heat and flames was basically to either take one another's life or take your own. It's hard for us to imagine, unless we have went through perilous times like that, just like a war victim. It's hard for us to imagine that things would actually fall into the category of becoming that distraught unless you've actually went through something like that. Thank God I've never had to go through anything similar to that, but I got a good enough imagination that God has given me to be able to look through a lot of this stuff and identifying that that it's a possibility that during the makeup of shock and awe, that's what had taken place.
All that it can, and that it needs essentially more support and specialist equipment to locate the 19 remaining in the enclave. Now, this seems to be consistent with what we're hearing from senior U.S. advisors, who also say they do not believe that Hamas is violating the ceasefire and that every effort is being made to find the dead again inside that enclave. Those senior advisors also said that the U.S. is involved now in mediation efforts and support efforts to provide that logistical and intelligence backing that is needed on the ground. The U.S. is even encouraging Israel to share intelligence about the whereabouts of these bodies so it can be passed on to Hamas. Egypt, one of the mediating bodies in all of this, also saying that this could potentially take many more.
I'm going to tell you something else that I've actually looked at pertaining to shock and awe regarding what went on in the event of the Oklahoma explosion, is that whenever something like that had occurred, or does occur, it displaces people's reasoning to the degree that they didn't actually identify what was actually occurring during the time that it occurred, pertaining to a major explosion that happened within the Memorial Building itself in 1995. What rattled me is that a few years after that the event happened in my particular life, I was up in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I actually met with one of the investigators that was assigned towards going to that particular region and doing a 30-day study. And there was like 3 other ones that done it, and none of them was supposed to compare their records. And at the end of the day, after 30 days, they all come up with the same analogy, that not only did they believe that there was explosion number 1, not only did they believe that there was explosion number 2, but they said that there was a possibility of explosion number 3. But none of the authorities in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, wanted to listen to that. They didn't want to examine that. Why? Because of shock and awe. You keep in mind that during the event of shock and awe, they first wanted to point their finger at Middle Eastern terrorists that done that, and they got, actually it was a streak of luck that an officer seen somebody driving down the road either with a license plate hanging, dangling from their vehicle, or one that was not on the vehicle, pulled Timothy McVeigh over, and the next thing you know, wound up going to jail over, I think it was a gun charge, that he had a gun in his vehicle and it wasn't registered or something like that. I may be off on some of the particulars here, but they got lucky in finding out that it was him within the first 72 hours. And that was the only thing that actually helped to clarify or verify that it was not Middle Eastern terrorism, but it was homegrown terrorism. But once more, during the event of shock and awe, you've seen how the public not only responded, but you see how the authorities responded to the shock and awe, even though they brought 4 investigators in and done a 30-day study, and they all come up with the same assessment. That pretty well speaks volumes about not just gross negligence, but purposely gross negligence, because they didn't analyze that in-depthly because there was too much false information going out at that time, just like pertaining to COVID. Whenever the shots was all out, there was all kinds of misguided information, even coming from the White House, about drinking bleach and doing everything else. It was just absolutely crazy. And so much information that was being stifled out to the American people and the world pertaining to false information. Pertaining to false information that now we can see how it damages the credibility of science. And by damaging the credibility of science, now you're putting people's lives in danger. This is the reason why we take people and we put them in space, is that we can analyze various things that we can't do in a gravity-controlled environment that we can do in a controlled environment up in outer space pertaining to not having gravity, that we can dissect various chemicals and various things that we couldn't do down here that we can do up there. Whenever you go to diminishing the value of something, then you go to questioning the authenticity of it. The public here in the United States has diminished the value of the presidency, of the power of an individual that has in the United States. And whenever you have the public that has whitewashed or watered down the presidency effectiveness of how powerful of being the president of the United States actually is, then you have once more all this wishy-washy stuff, to the degree that whenever the president does give out an order, now you question whether or not the order is authentic or not. Now, it can go just as far one way as it does the other towards the president being overpowerful, just like what went on in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, of them going in with blazing guns, even though that they had already known that their plans had been spoilt in a raid. You can go just as much as far to the far left as you do the far right in response to different things. But I'm just telling you, unless we have cool heads to prevail, this thing is only going to get even that much more wilder, pertaining to a Wild Wild West show, regardless whether it be science on medication, on vaccination shots, or diminishing the position of being a president, or diminishing the position of Christ being Christ. Because whenever I hear various ministers and various teachers and deacons tell me that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and all the other people in the Bible is equal to Christ, to me, they're diminishing the position of Christ. And I hope that those that listen to me can understand that.
If you're waiting, and we're going to continue this, we've got 7 weeks. Week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, no negotiation. Week 7, just before Thanksgiving, we go back through this whole game all over again. Let's get it done now. Let's continue those subsidies, and the shutdown will end immediately. That's all it takes. 1 paragraph.
Congressman John Garamendi, I do appreciate you taking the time this morning. Kate.
All right, we have brand new polling out of one of the most closely watched races in the country. With me now, CNN Chief data analyst, Harry. And really, 3 weeks away.
I want to apologize to my viewers regarding what I was actually inclined of watching, which was something that happened to Alaska pertaining to a tidal wave that hit that area that caused so much damage over there. I guess I either missed it, didn't recognize it, or they skipped out on going ahead and talking about it for right now. I don't know, on CNN.
I mean, you go back and check the record.
Do you feel the way RFK Jr. is talking about that is dangerous?
Well, I've said that I think that if I were a woman, I'd be talking to my doctor and not taking advice from RFK or any other government bureaucrat for that matter. But I just think that there are subjects and issues on which we have differences of opinion. I typically litigate those privately rather than publicly. But I think there are plenty of examples, and there are lots of times I could point out to you where we have differences of opinion, and I make my voice clear, and in some cases it results in a change, and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that's our job, is to try and present that check and balance, and we are a co-equal independent branch of the government. I have been here long enough to see presidents from both political parties and senates from both political parties and the interaction between the two, and it's always a fight. In every executive branch, every president pushes the edge of the envelope as far as they can, and I could give you half a dozen examples of where the Biden administration did that and operated in what I would say are extra, not only extrajudicial, but extra legislative ways.
And coming up, the Senate's top Democrat on foreign relations is our guest. Ranking member Jeanne Shaheen is
still trying to get that Alaska deal.
What does history tell us?
Okay, what does history tell us? We look at the polling data here, but I think that
don't look like I'm going to be able to get the Alaska deal right now.
Should be favoring this race and why.
Like I said, I apologize for that. I may have been talking so much while ago, I may have just skipped over it and didn't even recognize that it was even on. It's hard to catch everything, isn't it?
Could last forever. So she's really doing the nation a disservice. And these employees, when the government reopens, will likely get their jobs back. And if they don't, then they don't. But I don't think they have the right to say, hey, you have to keep us employed and pay us anyway while the nation...
And that's a good word, disservice. They've tried to disservice the presidency of that particular position, just like they've tried to disservice science, just like they've tried to disservice the position of Christ in trying to make everybody else in the Bible equal to Christ, including putting Virgin Mary on the same level as Christ. And to me, they're trying to disservice the position of Christ. I'm not saying that TBI didn't do a thorough job in them identifying that it was like a 98% possibility that Buford Pulser shot his own wife. I'm not saying that that's not authentic, because with me being predominant supporter of science, because of all the medical stuff that I've had to go through and all the medical stuff that I've been related around, I'm not going to question the authenticity of science regarding the proof of that event. What I'm trying to say is that in the event of so much craziness going on, regardless whether it was the craziness going on down in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, regardless whether it was the craziness going on pertaining to Buford Pulser, that in the exchange of those events, any and everything is a possibility. That's the reason why it is so vitally important that we do have thorough journalists, investigators that ask the right questions to the right people pertaining to the who, the what, the when, and the why. This is the reason why that I went out to Humphreys County and the other surrounding areas, and I done my own thorough investigation to be able to identify not only what the authorities were saying, but in response to also what the surrounding locals were saying during the time of the actual explosion. It is so critical that whenever you are a journalist investigator, regardless whether you're an independent journalist investigator or whether or not you get assigned this, it is so critical in you identifying what happened, when it happened, where it happened, why it happened, etc. Because if you don't ask all the right questions to try to get to the bottom of the answers, sometimes you'll wind up in an event like did happen with the Oklahoma bombing, to the degree that now history basically has to be rewritten. And boy, does that ever draw a great deal of controversy in the person that actually identified that they wasn't telling the whole truth. And somebody such as myself goes out there and opens up a can of worms. And then the next thing you know, my credibility starts being questioned. My motives start getting questioned. And the fact of the matter is, where they messed up at was right here in Weakley County of the authorities in Martin, Tennessee, that basically I was under attack. And I've tried to expose this in other materials that I put out there. I was under attack due to the fact that after 9/11, they changed their concept about the founder of the Jubilees Windmill Ministries that began in 1989 in the eyes of the public. They changed their strategy towards no longer wanting to prove that I was a liar, or no longer wanting to prove that I was a nut, a lunatic. But now, all of a sudden, amongst my own people, they tried to prove that I was a threat to them towards being a potential homegrown terrorist, similar towards Timothy McVeigh and Nichols, or similar towards other people that has went out here and purposely wanted to do harm and hurt to their own citizens. I know what I'm talking about. Regardless whether from A to Z, I know what I'm talking about, and people can try to ignore me all they want. People can try to debate me all they want. People can try to question my abilities or my motives in why I was assigned this assignment to begin with, going all the way back to 1983, whenever two hands miraculously come out of nowhere that grabbed both of my wrists, cold in nature, as a 4,000-pound automobile come crashing down on top of my torso that should have cut me in half. I know what I know, and that's what I know. I know that it was the power of God that intervened in my life towards saving my life. Not only that, but I lost 9 units of blood, and basically whenever they got me in the hospital, my blood pressure was 0, all my veins had collapsed. So I was theoretically, scientifically dead. These things are not questionable. These things are on paper. These things have been proven. I tell you what, whenever it comes to the Bible fulfilling itself in telling the saints of God, because obviously the Bible wasn't written for the unbelievers. It wasn't written for the agnostic. It wasn't really written for the antichrist type people. It was written for the believers. Whenever it comes to the scripture saying that Satan is the author of confusion, man, is that ever on the nailhead pertaining to all the confusion, especially today with social media, all our smartphone technology pertaining to the digital age that we live in today. Man, has it ever brought forth a flood of confusion. And this confusion didn't come from God. It didn't come from God's people, but it come from Satan, and it come from Satan's people. That's where the confusion comes from. And that's the reason why it is so critical that we do not underestimate the value of science. That's the reason why it's so critical that we do not underestimate the value of a president, regardless what president, regardless whether it's Democrat, Republican, or liberal. It don't matter. We do not underestimate the value of a president. That's the reason why it is so critical that we do not underestimate the value of the seat of Christ. Because there's only one Christ. There's only one Jesus Christ that died for all of man's sins, that is now sitting at the right hand of the Father making intercession prayer for all of us.
It is expected to go anywhere. One thing that has changed is a federal judge has halted the president's plans to lay off thousands of federal workers in the midst of this shutdown. The judge calling the plan politically motivated in the order put out just yesterday. The ruling comes after the White House budget director made it very clear that, well...
And it could very well be. I'm not saying that it's not politically motivated because of Donald Trump making some of the statements that he's made about he's going to be people's vindicator. It could very well be. I'm not saying that it's not. Once more, you can overpower that position just like you can underpower that position. It was the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, along with the FBI, that overpowered their position in how they went about doing what they done down in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas. In addition to the entrapment, in addition to them pouring tear gas into the building for 6.5 hours, over 200 canisters that was lethal tear gas, knowing good and well that all it takes is one spark to set the daggum thing on fire. Knowing good and well that them women and children had to be taken care of, and the women had to be seen. They had to be able to see down in them hole stores how to take care of them children, and had to have either coal oil lamps or lanterns or candles or something burning. Well, once all that tear gas got down there, what do you think happened to it? Turned into a towering inferno. They not only entrapped the people in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, they not only violated their own principles pertaining to proper protocol, but they also killed those people down in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, towards pouring that poisonous tear gas into that building that's never supposed to be used in an enclosed building, much less on women and children, that basically turned it into a towering inferno. Now, they can say whatever they want to say. And this is my opinion, and I got the right to my opinion. Regardless, it would be my opinion about what went on in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, regardless whether it be my opinion towards what went on pertaining to the Oklahoma bombing, regardless whether what went on pertaining to the recent mid-Tennessee explosion, regardless whether it's about the Buford-Pusser case or any other thing. These are my opinions about what I can see and how I can see it, that God has given me the abilities of seeing these things, or the translation of identifying these various positions, regardless whether it be the positions of science or the positions of the president or the positions of the Lord Jesus Christ in sitting in the seat of Christ. These are my opinions, and people can either listen to them and agree with them, or they can disagree with them.
In Alaska,
Here we go.
being evacuated
Alaska.
from their villages after
Finally
a
got it.
devastating storm ravaged coastal communities and swept away homes. Across the region, more than 1,500 people have been displaced. The residents are being flown over 500 miles away to Anchorage.
My
Officials
God.
calling it the most significant airlift in the state's entire history.
My God.
This morning, officials believe 2 people are still missing. Joining me now is Jeremy Zadek, the Public Information Officer for the Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Thank you for being here. I know this is a difficult time there. Can you give us a sense of how these missions to get people to safety have occurred? Because this is the most significant airlift, the most that they've ever done there in Alaskan history.
Yeah, it has really been a Herculean effort to get resources out to the communities to both perform the search and rescue, but also to airlift people out of their communities that have been devastated to more safe accommodations, and then get them into our larger population center here in Anchorage so we can provide them with kind of robust services. One of the biggest challenges in Alaska is our distance. You mentioned the 500 miles between Anchorage and the area that's been impacted. But the next closest community with really services for people is about 100 miles away by air. There are no roads to these communities. So we have to rely on aircraft. And in Alaska, with our poor weather, flying can often be very difficult.
Yeah, you can't send things on the ground to these communities. And we were looking at some of the pictures of the devastation where the water has risen way up into these buildings, sweeping some of these homes away. Can you give us a sense of what is needed now? Because you have all these residents who have been flown out of their villages with, I imagine, almost nothing.
Yeah, the top priority is caring for people. The evacuation process is still going on. There's folks that are in Kitnuk and Quingilliguk that need to move out. We're moving them to Bethel, staging them there, and then we're moving them further to Anchorage. We're looking at other places in our state where we can put them. As a small state with a population around 750,000 people statewide, this is a state twice the size of Texas. We don't have a lot of resources to put towards this, or we don't have a lot of accommodations easily available to us. So we're searching for those, building out our capacity to shelter people now, and then we're moving people from those communities. We did that yesterday and moved 264 people out of Bethel to Anchorage, sheltered them here, and we're expanding our shelter capacity so we can bring more in.
Just give me some sense of whether or not the federal government, have you asked for funds? Are you getting help from the federal government now? Because you said you just don't have the resources for all these people and to deal with all this damage right now.
Yeah, we've had the FEMA in our State Emergency Operations Center for some days now. The FEMA IMAT team is also in Anchorage. We haven't called upon them. We have the FEMA Region 10 in Bothell, Washington, that's been communicating with us. It's really not a matter of what federal resources we could use. It's getting those resources out to those far-flung areas of our state. We have the equipment to do that. It's really the shelter capacity to absorb so many people in such a short time with the resources that we have in outside of those communities. So we have plenty of aircraft to go in and do these missions. It's just the distance that is required and all of the logistics that need to go into caring for people when we get them out of their community.
Yeah, and I know at this point you don't know when, how, and if people are going to be able to go back, how long that might be, but the devastation is extensive. It looks like it's going to be quite a while. Jeremy Zedek, thank you so much for explaining what is happening there and giving people an idea of what is going on there in Alaska. Appreciate it. Okay.
There are new developments this morning.
All right, I'm going to first apologize because I thought last night whenever I first heard this about Alaska that it had something to do with a tsunami. Maybe they was emphasizing that it was like a tsunami pertaining to the flooding. I don't even know how much rain that they actually got. I hadn't heard yet from the meteorologist towards how much rain that they got. But if you really think about it, this once more is my opinion. Why did Alaska get hit with such of a storm, number one? And number two, why was it in the essence of rain versus the essence of snow? It's got to do with climate warming. It's got to do with the weather pattern changes. And, you know, it hadn't been just but a few years ago. It was long about Christmas time. I think it was about maybe 7 years ago, maybe 6 or a little before, a little after. Anyways, basically, it was actually colder here in the States than it was in Alaska because it registered almost 70 degrees right around Christmas time in Alaska. Whenever you have these abnormalities happening pertaining to the forces of nature, you're going to see things just like the Bible talks about, that in the last days we will see things in the heavens and see things upon earth such as humanity has never ever seen before. But then again, whenever you have somebody spewing out lies towards saying, oh, no, global warming ain't real, and it's just all our imaginations because he's trying to protect the rich people pertaining to the oil industries, once more, you're sending out confusing messages. You're sending out multiple messages to the degree that no wonder people has become disoriented and not knowing who to believe or what to believe or etc. It's bad. Right now is the worstest time that I've ever seen regarding true, clear clarity, regardless whether it's over science, regardless whether it's over this, regardless whether it's over an investigation over what recently happened in Middle Tennessee, or an investigation towards having to go and investigate the investigators that obviously did not tell the whole truth pertaining to the Oklahoma bombing, or they did not tell the whole truth in response towards what went on in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas. It's really bad whenever you have to have your citizens, ordinary citizens such as myself, a civilian, to have to roll up his sleeves and go do these things that the professional people are supposed to be doing. It's really sad.
And he had somebody in Lisa, who was his puppet, worked in the office really as the top person. And I think that she should be looked at very strongly. I hope they're looking at Shifty Schiff. I hope they're looking at all these people. And I'm allowed to find out. I'm allowed to, I'm, in theory, the chief law enforcement officer. But I have a very good, talented group.
I'll take.
And theory speaking, not from a legal standpoint, but theory speaking, Donald Trump is the chief. Because why? Because he fits under the tier of the federal agency. I want to show you real quick what they're doing out here in response towards cleaning off fence lines and going to put in some sort of a dam, or not a dam, but a spillway, or a break pertaining to the flooding. You see how that field right there has eroded pertaining to that large low area right there. Whenever I was just a child growing up, that wasn't there. It was there a little bit, but not near as badly as what it is now. That has done that in the past 40, 50 years since we moved to Tennessee, in response towards so much of it that has been dug out pertaining to water flooding. But anyways, they're going to go in, they're going to put a base up there. It's going to slow down the water. Then they're going to put a drain down here that's going to slow down the drainage of the water. And then they're going to take a lot of that topsoil, and they're going to fill up the low-lying area right there. And then I'm thinking the reason why that they got that topsoil just sitting there is because they'll take that topsoil and they'll put it back on top of the ground, because that's the topsoil there that's got all the nutrients in it. Because if they don't put that back on the bare ground that they've recently dug out right there, then they'll have to go through the extremes towards putting back the nutrients back into the ground, which will take years to do. So they've learned to do this. Once more, this is part of science in identifying pertaining to flood control and etc., that they're trying to basically save this field. That way, possibly 100 years from now, it'll still be tillable ground, or somebody can take it and do whatever that needs to be done with it back here. Because that's all basically TWRA in behind there. You can see all the woods way back in the back. It goes all the way back in the back. That's all. That's probably about, give or take, about a half a mile from the Obion River. This is all part of the Beach Ridge area. That's the reason why this road right here was named Beach Ridge. It was all part of the ridge lining that basically starts somewhere around Dresden, and it basically slopes towards going off into the Mississippi River, which is probably less than about, give or take, about 12 or 15 miles away the crow flies from here. They claim at one time all this was actually under the ocean. They claim at one time they've actually found fossils and stuff that only comes from a parcel being under the water. Of course, that's going back hundreds of millions of years ago. But anyways, looks like they're doing a good job. They're straightening all this stuff out. Back over here to the very end over here, You can't really see it right there, but they've cleared all that baseline area right there out, from that tree right there all the way back to the very back of the tree line where TWRA is, Tennessee Wildlife Resources is, or Recreation is. They've cleared all that line out because the people that owns this field owns the field connected into that backfield. So they know what they're doing. But it takes time, it takes money, it takes energy, it takes fortitude, it takes sitting down and itemizing all this stuff. It takes science, it takes common sense to be able to sit and say, well, look, this is what's happened in 50 years, or this is what's happened in 100 years, and this is what's going to happen in the next 100 years if we continue to let it continue to keep continuing on. It's part of prevention. Same way with science. Same with medical. It's part of prevention in trying to prevent people from getting sick and dying. And when we go to questioning the authenticity of these things, then we go to diminishing that in which what has been established already. God bless. God bless America. Good luck to all of us. God bless our endeavors towards which way America goes from this moment on. And may God have mercy on all of us. And shalom.